Collecting retro games and consoles is so embarrassing. Like, oh my god, I really hope that I can find this console that came out 20 years ago for a decent price. Oh no, how do I fix this game cartridge from 15 years ago that nobody has anymore because everyone's moved on with their lives? Grow up! And not to mention, like, the FOMO of like, oh wow, well I didn't have this console as a kid and everyone says it's really cool, so maybe I should get that. Come on. I'm your cool Uncle Mirza, and I have been a victim of the latter FOMO. Of course, collecting retro games and consoles is an expensive hobby. Most hobbies can get expensive really quickly, not just retro games. The path to bankruptcy and gambling addiction, after all, is littered with Pokemon energy cards. And while we all collect games for different reasons, maybe you're trying to relive nostalgia, maybe you're trying to discover something you didn't have a chance to as either a kid or when you were nary a thought in your parents' minds. We're gonna ignore the people who do it for profit. So every now and again, something piques your interest and you get peer pressured. It's not like people are telling you to buy something. It's just, you just start seeing it and you're like, oh, maybe I am missing out. And you get it. And then you're like, I have this thing now. And the good thing is you can always resell, but sometimes you have your reasons for hanging on to it. And today I am here for you with 4 consoles that I don't really like, but I've hung on to. And I'm just gonna tell you why I got them and why I'm hanging on to them. Now, this doesn't include anything that I have that I'm not using. That sounds so embarrassingly capitalist, but if right now I'm playing my Game Boy Color games basically exclusively on my Game Boy Pocket Color, but that doesn't mean that I dislike or feel disappointed by the actual Game Boy Colors I have. It's just sort of, they're kind of retired, but I still love them. So this is not gonna count those. It's just things that I got for one reason or another that have left me disappointed by the purpose that I purchased them for. And I've kept them for one reason or another. So let's go and take a look at these all-American rejects that are all made in Japan. All right, first off, we have the probably least controversial or loaded of them all, which is the Nintendo Wii. I didn't really buy this with a lot of passion, to be honest. I know everyone and their grandparents had a Wii, not even as a figure of speech, just literally. So they're very affordable. They're still, I think, very affordable. You can probably pick one up for under $50. The thing is, I was never particularly drawn to it, and a lot of the games on it that people sort of rave about are ones that I've managed to play on other consoles. But it is quite a good emulation homebrew machine. And for the price, that's really fantastic, especially, if you want to hook it up to a CRT. That's something that is very simple to do. It came out at a time where people were transitioning from CRTs to LCD TVs, so you tend to have the 16:9 ratio as well as the 4:3 ratio on everything. So it is just a very versatile device for that. I got it with that in mind, to use it with my CRT as an emulation station. But what the issue was here for me is, first off, most of the consoles that I'm actually interested in playing on my TV, I have the physical consoles. Big draw for this is also the GameCube abilities. You can just put your ports in and it's very easy to, all the handheld GameCubes, they all have a Wii motherboard fit into them, not a GameCube. But I have a GameCube. it felt like there wasn't really a purpose. For things like SNES, NES, I actually prefer to emulate those handheld anyway. That aside, I also ended up getting something called the RGB Recall box, which has native SCART output. So all I need to do is just plug a SCART cord from that to my RGB modded TV, and it runs kind of, basically like RetroArch type, and I'm able to play those games. And that's just a much more clutter-free method than the Wii, because this guy does not have a native SCART output. It has component, so I have to put the component through to an adapter and then that through to SCART. Also, the whole like motion detection bar and stuff that you have to set up for the Wii, plugging the gamepad into the Wiimote is just a lot of stuff to juggle. And while I enjoy tinkering with things, when I want to play a game, I don't want to tinker. I get annoyed that modern consoles even make you like update stuff or be connected to the internet for things. Like, I literally just want to play the game. So the Wii is kind of just sitting there with a lot of cool purpose that is kind of remaining unfulfilled. I think if you have a TV that takes component, or you even want to do it over HDMI, you could even pair it with an upscaler. It's a great homebrew device, especially at the price. And the price is honestly the reason why I'm hanging on to it. It's a small thing. It's not like I have like a PS5 here. So it's easy to hold on to, and it's not worth selling. I feel like the worth selling thing or worth trading for me always comes down to, well, if I want it again, will it be easier to have just not made that money at all, or to put that money down again? And honestly, I would rather have a Wii that's in pretty good physical condition that I don't use at the moment than to sell it for like $40 and then have to scour the filthy internet for a Wii that is not grody as hell when it's time to suddenly renew my interest in it. So that's why I'm keeping it. I think this is definitely the least dramatic for me. Next up, we have the PSVita, which is very similar to the Wii in that it serves primarily as an emulation device more than anything. But I feel like I have more, joy or more desire for it to work when it comes to the Vita, because Sony really did a good job when it came to the physical design of the handheld. I love the PSP, and this is very much a worthy successor. The OLED screen, the little joysticks, the buttons feel really great, the trigger buttons, the face buttons, it just looks so sleek, and it's just the perfect size for a handheld. The screen feels large without making the device feel too bulky. Of course, the joke is that they forgot to make games for the Vita. I'm sure there are a lot of hidden gems in the truest sense of the word, or games that just were Japanese only and maybe an English patch exists. There's nothing similar to the Wii. There's nothing really that I want to play. The only thing I have on this, which I haven't even played yet, is the Metal Gear Solid HD collection. Otherwise, a lot of the things I'm interested in are games that exist on other consoles that I would prefer to play them on. For example, I know they did like a Final Fantasy X port, and while that's my favorite game, I'm still going to prefer to play it on PS2. So people really like the Vita for emulation, especially for PSP and PS1. Now that's something that I don't understand. The biggest thing that people talk about when it comes to the PS Vita is that they love that it has an OLED screen. And I feel like sometimes all the discussion of how beautiful a screen is overshadows a lot of things that to me are more important than that. We're basically emulating a PSP, and like from the get-go, this kind of looks weird to me. So I just played Final Fantasy Tactics on my PSP. I really enjoyed it, and I mean, the PSP screen is not OLED, it's not super fancy, but it works for me nonetheless. But yeah, I mean, I think that if you haven't played on a PSP or you don't like how the PSP looks, this looks fine. But for me, it's like too clean and too big. It's a lot like my preference to play on screens that have a retro pixel mode, to play on the ITA screen on Game Boy Advance as opposed to an IPS screen. I just like that original look of things. I'm not really one who chases big screens and smooth pixels, so I'm not gonna play my PSP games on this. I'm gonna play them on PSP. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. If I didn't have a PSP, I would be happy to play on the PS Vita. And the other thing, right, is to play PS1 games on the PS Vita. Now that is rather something else. There are other handheld ways to play PS1 now. I played some PS1 games on the PSP from the digital marketplace back when that was a thing, and I just got my PSP. That's how I played Final Fantasy 7 and 8 for the first time. But now, not only do I have a PS1 and a PS2, and I can play those on TV, but you can emulate PS1 very easily on most devices. I mean, the Miu Mini can emulate PS1 with the correct aspect ratio. With the PS1 on the PS Vita, we can see that we have black bars like to here. And that's obviously because of the aspect ratio. You could stretch it out if you are pathological, which people I have seen do that. I don't understand. That's just insane to me. But so you're playing the game really on a tinier screen, which is, again, you know, you could be playing it on like a Miu Mini Plus at this point. You could be playing it on a plethora of other devices. You could be playing it on your Steam Deck. So this doesn't to me feel like the best way. But then there's like, I was willing to give it a chance for PS1 games, to be honest, just because I like the feel of the device so much. But then there's all this like fear-mongering about the OLED screen. And I call it fear-mongering not because it's untrue, but because I feel that maybe it's out of proportion. I don't know if it's true. That's the only reason. I just don't have any solid proof for it, of the burn-in being a lot more prevalent and a lot easier to experience on an early OLED screen like this. And I can honestly kind of see that being a problem, because if you're playing a PS1 game and you've got it where there's just pixels happening on this area but not on the sides, I could see burn-in happening, and that paranoia keeps me from really being able to enjoy PS1 games on the PS Vita. You know, I'm sure I've said a lot of things that a lot of you guys disagree with, because I know how beloved the PS Vita is as an emulation device, but it just doesn't work for me. And why do I keep it is, again, we go back to what I said about the Wii, selling it and then trying to find one in as good condition for a similar affordable deal price that I got is stupid. And it's just so beautiful that I really want to make it work. And, you know, maybe one day I have this like bizarre idea that one day I'll be able to truly dive in to the PS Vita library and just be able to check that out. But for now, it sits in my drawer and continues to drain battery and forget what year it is, which I think is a really great thing they did with the Sony handhelds, where once the battery's drained while it's off, it just is like, where am I? Who am I? What year is it? Now moving on to something that is easier, and we're not talking about emulation, but has some of the similar problems, is the 3DS LL, known in the English-speaking world as the 3DS XL. It's a big 3DS. Now, I didn't have a 3DS at the time of release, and now I feel very lucky to have three. I have an original one, a 3DS, a new 3DS, and this 3DS XL, LL rather. Now, the interesting thing about the LL XL models is that they seem to be quite sought after, both for the 3DS, but especially the DS, because I believe the DSi XL, some of them have IPS screens and some of them have dual IPS screens. Again, we go back to like the screen chasers, which I'm not a screen chaser. I know the DS and 3DS is a very homebrew nation kind of thing as well, but that's not what we're talking about here. I've never really been interested in homebrew on the 3DS or the DS, aside from playing native content, because I have a Game Boy, I have a Game Boy Advance, etc. So we're not going to worry about that too much right now. But the thing for me is I'm just not a huge fan of the ergonomics or the aspect ratio, not aspect ratio, sorry, but the screen size on the 3DS XL LL. I know the aspect ratio is correct, but it just feels way too big. It like looks blown out to me. I know it probably doesn't to a lot of you, but to me it does, and it just feels like I don't need my DS, 3DS games to be this big. And also holding the LL is like, it's like holding a modern cell phone, because cell phones just keep getting bigger, and that's unnecessary. They don't need to be this big. And I really do wonder if the popularity of the DS XL and LL just comes down to a lot of people who are feeling that nostalgia for these devices, getting older and having vision problems. And so they're like, I need a bigger screen. Fortunately for me, I've had vision problems since I was like 6. So I've gotten used to the world around me through the lens of rather high prescription glasses. So I'm completely happy with smaller screens. And so this to me feels unnecessarily heavy, unnecessarily large, and unnecessarily blown out. So why am I keeping it? If this was like just a plain one, I would probably sell it. But I got it for a good price. That seems to be the constant. Everything I have, for the most part, I've gotten for a good price. But it's just so cute. I still haven't played a Dragon Quest game, guys, but I love the Dragon Quest aesthetic, and this is so pretty, and just the little slime popping out. Like, it gives me joy to see the shell. That's it. That's all. It's a silly reason to keep it, but that's what this video is about. Finally, we're gonna shift to the Game Boy Micro. Now, I've been doing a lot of, I don't really like it. I want it to work out, but I don't really like it. But I'm not mad kind of thing. But this, guys, I'm mad. I'm mad about this. So this is a long story. I did not know that the Game Boy Micro existed. I think a lot of us didn't know, because it sounds like it came out around the same time as the Game Boy Advance SP. And you've got a big screen, a clamshell, it still takes Game Boy games. The Game Boy Micro just feels like such a downgrade if you are presented with both of those options. It feels in a way like it should be the 2DS of its time. But when I found out it existed, I was like, oh yeah, that's cute. Because it is, right? It's cute. But I didn't particularly want it, especially looking at the price. The price, I think, of Game Boy Micros hasn't necessarily really gone up or down since I first looked into them, which was a couple of years ago. They're still pretty consistent in the 100 to 200. So they're very pricey. So that also made me not want it. I love the Game Boy Advance. I love the Game Boy Advance SP. So why would I go after this? And this, my friends, is where I fell into the absolute danger of hype. Now, yeah, you thought you could only get hyped about new things, right? No, apparently you can get hyped about old things too. In the Instagram Game Boy community was, and I think there are some people who still, their entire thing is Game Boy Micro, but I feel like there was this point where everyone was genuinely really obsessed with the Game Boy Micro. And one thing that didn't help is Kelly, who is the person behind Next Stop Please, who makes really cute labels, is still making these really adorable faceplate stickers. And it's such a terrible reason, but you have to remember, I am out here always saying we should have the right to repair. When you buy technology, you should really consider whether it's repairable. And I'm out here with a Galaxy Z Flip because it's cute. And it's like one of the most difficult to repair, pain in the ass things in the world. Like you literally have to take it apart to repair anything. Take apart the screen, that is. This kind of also goes back to what I said in another video, which I'll put up here, where I talk about knowing your limits when it comes to repair. And I fell into that trap because around this time we also saw a lot of videos of people who were talking about bad batteries in micros. How I bought this Game Boy Micro, they said it's dead, but it just had a bad battery. And it was just everywhere. And people would say shit like 99% of the time it's a bad battery. So it was like, okay, bad battery. So I bought a Game Boy Micro from Japan, and I spent a pretty penny on it when it comes to the overall cost of handheld consoles, but it was quote unquote cheap when it came to a Game Boy Micro. Lucky me, it was not a bad battery problem. I took it apart and everything, and I couldn't find what was wrong. Also because, fun fact, we don't really have very good schematics and stuff for the Game Boy Micro the way that we do for other Game Boys. So I was kind of stuck with a 4 parts. And then I saw someone on Facebook Marketplace selling a Game Boy Micro for a decent price, and this one was not for parts. Now this was a pain in the ass experience as well, because this guy, he was like, I'm no longer in the country, so my friend needs to meet you. And he also would not stop messaging me, trying to flirt with me, which is really great given that my Facebook page is dead. I use it for Marketplace, and so there's no picture of me that's publicly available. So he was just going off the basis of woman. After a long time of waiting, and his friend being like, I don't want to go to Brooklyn because I got jumped once in Brooklyn, he met with me. Now here's where things get really increasingly worse. This guy spent was stringing me along for a good, I think, couple of months. So this entire time his friend had the Micro in his car. He just wouldn't meet with me. And his friend was an Uber driver. And sometimes you get into an Uber and you're like, wow, this Uber smells like so much Axe. It smells so bad. It was like that. So it was also I think the warmer months. So it was in a hot Uber that smelled like some fragrant oils, not Axe, but oil-based fragrances. And so when I got it, I tested it by turning it on and playing a game, and it was fine, and I wanted to go home because he also kept me waiting on the street and it was raining. I go home and I realize that this thing stinks. The smell of the fragrance was just seeped into every bit of it. I took it apart and you could smell the fragrance on the motherboard. That aside, I think the fragrance was keeping some parts of it also gunked up. And let me tell you, I tried every single fragrance removal tip on the internet, from baking soda to coffee to charcoal, and nothing worked. It was so powerful and it was so disgusting. So I wasn't gonna keep that. I'm not crazy sensitive to fragrances, but I think even someone like who doesn't have a nose would be offended by that smell. It was just so, it gave me a headache. And by this point, I had spent enough money on parts and on one broken Game Boy and one quote unquote not broken Game Boy, but very smelly, that I could have just bought a new, or not a new, but like a working, good condition Game Boy Micro from the beginning. And that sucked. And I probably should have left it there, but by this point I was determined to get a Game Boy Micro that worked and did not smell like the JCPenney Macy's perfume aisle. So I got another one. This time I believe I did not get a for parts one. It wasn't like a good condition one though. And I had to swap some parts out, I think, with the parts that I had left over. And by now I had absolutely spent more than I would have on a working Game Boy Micro. And for what? For a tiny screen that's cute, but not particularly comfortable to play on. You know, I'm always saying, I said several times in this video that I'm not a screen chaser. Like, I'm not like, I need it to be smooth and 4K and OLED and whatever. I just want it to look nice, and I like seeing the rough details. With the Micro, you can't really see any details. It's just like general vibes. So I don't really use it. And I think that, you know, I do have this resentment towards these series of experiences in trying to actually acquire one. It taught me a very important lesson. It taught me that lesson that I passed on in my video where I told you to really make sure that you balance your pros and cons. You think about the sunk cost that's gonna go into you trying to save money. So I guess it was a good lesson, but you know, it's expensive. Why am I keeping it? Because the amount of money I paid for this stupid thing, like if I sell it, I'll be lucky to break even. Because yes, I count all of those parts and stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it. It doesn't make sense to sell it. And it's, you know, it's cute, whatever. Stupid. But that's it, which I feel like is not bad, you know, 4 things, right? That I don't love, and only one which I actually regret, because I don't regret the others. Not a bad track record, I would say. All right, we are back. What did you think? Are you upset, disappointed, angry, pitchforky about my choices? Please don't be. It's all personal. Like I said, I like all of them for a reason. They just maybe don't gel with me for one or another reason. Let me know in the comments if you have anything that's similar. Do you have anything just sitting in your drawers where you're like, I thought I could love you. I really did. Let me know. I would love to know. I'm sure some of my favorites are going to be in that list of yours. As always, a big thank you to my Ko-fi supporters. You guys really help this channel keep going and help me feel motivated to do the videos. Shout out to my April supporters. Thank you, Chillwatt, Ryan L. Thank you, Tim Balonius and Gerbison. Thank you, Trin Nguyen. Thank you, Autumn, Alexander Carrillo, Complex Milk. You guys are real rock stars. Wow, I felt like a teacher saying that. And of course, thank you to anyone who's bought anything from my Ko-fi shop. That also makes me very, very happy. And thank you to you who is watching this video and subscribing as well for more along these lines. I have been your cool Uncle Marissa, and do not forget that you are always welcome at Cool Uncle's house, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.